Hey guys, tonight we're trading in Netflix, pillows, and your half-finished Wordle for something a little more Roman and a lot less comfortable. Welcome to the world of ancient Rome, where the only thing more confusing than the plumbing is the concept of being a virgin. Don't expect toga parties and marble bathtubs. Tonight, we're talking about why you absolutely, positively, did not want to be a virgin in ancient Rome. So before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and whether you're wearing more or fewer layers than a Roman senator's conscience. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft background hum, and sink into whatever soft modern surface you call a bed. Maybe put your phone on Do Not Disturb so your boss doesn't text you about tomorrow's meeting. Take a breath, get comfortable, and let's drift back. But seriously, have you ever wondered what being a good Roman virgin actually meant? Did you get a gold star? Was there a punch card system? Did your parents start hinting about nice eligible senators the minute you turned 12? What about hygiene? Did virgins have to take extra baths? Or did everyone just agree to collectively not notice the smell? And speaking of baths, who decided a giant communal pool was a good idea anyway? And what happens if you accidentally sneeze on a Vestal virgin? Do you get cursed, exiled, or just awkwardly ignored forever? Congratulations, you've just woken up in ancient Rome. You are young, you are untouched, and you are about to find out why that's both an asset and a liability. Good luck, and may Jupiter have mercy on your self-esteem. You enter the world to the sound of your parents immediately calculating your future marital worth. If you're a girl, congratulations. Your value just doubled, but only if you keep your reputation as spotless as your father's toga at election time. Your job, from day one, is to survive childhood, avoid mud, and not accidentally become a scandal in baby form. Let's set the scene. It's your first day on Earth, and you're already being judged. Your grandmother is eyeing your toes for good luck. Your father is quietly hoping for a son but manages a stiff smile. Your mother's first words are probably, "Careful with the linens," because even your swaddling cloth is now a potential dowry talking point. Before you're old enough to sit up, there's already a ledger in someone's mind tallying your virtues, vices, and marketability. Childhood in ancient Rome isn't just about surviving the occasional plague, mystery rash, or your cousin's wrestling phase. It's about maintaining a reputation so fragile that even a spilled cup of goat's milk could bring shame upon the house. You can forget about wild, muddy games in the garden. No, you'll be politely encouraged to develop hobbies like sitting quietly, not speaking unless spoken to, and perhaps a little weaving, nothing that could bruise a limb or your family's social credit score. Your mother becomes the coach, referee, and public relations manager of your entire childhood. She has two main jobs, keeping you alive and keeping you marriageable. Both require the reflexes of a gladiator and the subtlety of a senator in a tax evasion trial. Did you cough at the wrong time during a family dinner? That's 3 days of herbal remedies and a lecture about how no senator's son wants to marry a girl who wheezes like a Sicilian goat. Did you trip on your own sandal in the street? Prepare for a hasty retreat and a whispered apology to Venus for tempting fate. Meanwhile, your father's job is to invest in your future as if you are a particularly delicate and high-maintenance piece of property. He'll drop hints at dinner parties about your good temperament and unparalleled skill at sitting very still, all while keeping a close eye on your dowry potential. You know you're in trouble when your father starts bartering extra sheep with the neighbors, just in case. You are, essentially, a living, breathing savings account with pigtails. Every family visit is an evaluation. The extended relatives arrive like a board of directors, ready for their quarterly report. Your aunt asks if you can sing, your uncle quizzes you on household gods, and your grandmother sniffs your hair to check for unmarried girl freshness, which is a real thing, apparently, and not just something invented to make you nervous about bath day. Even your birthday parties are networking events. Your cake, if you're lucky enough to get one, is shaped like a tiny altar to Juno, and the presents are usually practical. A new spindle, a shiny brooch, or a stern warning about the dangers of improper posture. Don't even think about asking for a puppy. Dogs are for boys who might someday need an animal to hide behind in battle. Every day is an opportunity for character building, or, as your parents see it, reputation management. Your neighbors, servants, and that one old man who lives next to the bathhouse are all quietly keeping score. Did you greet the priest properly? Were your sandals dusty at the forum? Did you remember to thank your grandmother for the world's scratchiest tunic? It's all being logged in the great family ledger of not embarrassing us before the gods and the neighbors. It's not all bad. Sometimes, your parents surprise you with a tiny silver coin for good behavior, which you're encouraged to put away for your dowry. Occasionally, you get a rare moment of actual fun, maybe watching the chariot races or feeding breadcrumbs to the neighbors' chickens, as long as you don't get any on your tunic. But even these moments come with a warning. Remember, you represent this family. In ancient Rome, childhood is less about growing up and more about not ruining your future market value. Your first and most important lesson: you are an investment. Keep your tunic clean, your nose out of trouble, and your reputation locked down tighter than the temple treasury. Because one day, the family expects returns, and they're not talking about your pottery skills. End scene, and don't forget to keep your sandals tied. Scandals start with loose laces. Suddenly, your body is changing. And so are your parents' expectations. Your mother starts giving you the talk, which is mostly a long list of things not to do, ever, with anyone, under penalty of death, or worse, social embarrassment. Puberty in Rome comes with less privacy and more opinions than a modern Facebook comment section. One day, you're minding your own business, perfectly content with spinning wool and avoiding public disasters. The next, you wake up to your mother announcing, in a tone normally reserved for funeral processions, that you need to start behaving like a young lady. You're not exactly sure what this means, but judging by the way your father suddenly develops a keen interest in his paperwork and your grandmother starts smuggling in amulets for modesty, you know something is up. There is no warning. Your voice cracks, your face does things it's never done before, and your body decides it would be hilarious to start growing in all the places you can't easily hide under a stola. Puberty in ancient Rome is not a gentle process. It's a public spectacle, one that involves your entire extended family and half your neighborhood. Your first pimple becomes a matter of public record, and if you think you're going to handle your own laundry now, think again. That's your mother's new full-time job, just in case anything unseemly needs to be hidden from the servants or the gods, whichever is more judgmental this week. You're not alone in your suffering. Your friends are all in the same boat, and suddenly, every conversation is about who started wearing a sash, who has a new hairdo, and who had the audacity to blush when the baker's son said hello. There's a weird sense of competition, but also a silent pact. If one of you survives this, maybe the rest of you can too. Meanwhile, boys your age get a free pass to run wild until their voices change and someone shoves them into a toga and tells them to stop hitting things with sticks. Now, let's talk about the talk. In modern times, it might involve diagrams, awkward pamphlets, and a swift escape from the room. In Rome, it's an ongoing, multi-part series. Your mother gives you rules about where to sit, how to walk, which foods to avoid lest you inflame your humors, and, most importantly, how to avoid eye contact with any eligible male unless you're prepared for a wedding. You're advised to be quiet in public, never laugh too loudly, and for Jupiter's sake, never let your tunic slip off your shoulder, or the neighbor women will have material for gossip until the next Saturnalia. Bath time becomes even more of a minefield. Suddenly, every female relative you have feels entitled to comment on your posture, your skin, and whether you're developing properly. Modesty is the buzzword, though you're rarely allowed to be alone. Every change in your appearance is up for debate, like an episode of Roman RuPaul's Drag Race, but with more scowling aunties and fewer sequins. The real challenge, though, is the new level of surveillance. Your outings are strictly monitored. Your walk to the forum is now a parade, with an older relative 2 paces behind, 2 paces ahead, and 6 paces to either side, just in case you attempt to make a break for independence or, worse, a spontaneous conversation. Even the family dog starts watching you suspiciously. Then come the suitors, or more accurately, the parade of fathers and mothers dragging sons by the ear for a quick glance at the goods. You're expected to stand quietly, answer questions about weaving, and never let on that you'd rather be at home eating honey cakes. Every nod, every smile, every accidental glance is scrutinized. Blink twice in the direction of a young man, and congratulations, you're engaged, or at least the rumor mill is. And all of this happens before you're even allowed to have an opinion about anything. You're told you're a woman now, but you're still not allowed to choose your own sandals. Ancient Rome, much like puberty itself, is big on mixed messages. So you try to survive by blending in, keeping your tunic straight, and counting the days until someone else in the neighborhood does something embarrassing enough to take the heat off you. It's not much of a comfort, but it's all you've got, because in Rome, puberty isn't just a phase. It's a public event with audience participation, ongoing commentary, and absolutely no refunds. Think helicopter parents are bad. Try Roman matrons, paid spies, and the neighbor's grandmother. Your every move is monitored with the intensity of an imperial tax collector. You can't go to the market alone. You can't visit the forum without a family escort. Privacy is as mythical as a polite public latrine. From the moment you open your eyes in the morning, you're under surveillance worthy of a small dictatorship. Forget me time. The closest you'll ever come is the 3 seconds it takes to roll off your straw mattress before your mother swoops in to straighten your tunic and check for any signs of moral decay, such as a smile or a slightly enthusiastic yawn. Your day is scheduled with military precision. Breakfast, eaten with an audience. If you thought your family table was judgmental, try dining under the gaze of 3 generations of Roman women whose sole hobby is keeping young girls on the right path. The right path, of course, is wherever the chaperone says it is, and definitely not within 20 feet of the neighbor's charming but suspicious grandson. When it's time to venture outside, you don't just grab your basket and stroll to the market. You assemble your entourage, your mother, the general, your aunt, the backup general, and a rotating cast of disapproving older women, the infantry, all armed with gossip and a 6th sense for scandal. The streets of Rome are busy, noisy, and full of distractions, but none of that matters because you are moving at the pace of the slowest, most suspicious relative. If you glance at a handsome baker, prepare to be intercepted and redirected toward the vegetable stall. If you linger by the fountain, someone will ask if you're plotting a love affair or, worse, trying to get a tan. The only thing less private than your daily outings is your own home. Roman houses are open, bustling, and filled with family, slaves, and visitors, each one a potential informant for your parents. Your bedroom isn't sacred. Doors don't lock, curtains are thin, and the walls are about as soundproof as a basket of figs. If you try to sneak a moment to yourself, odds are good that your grandmother will appear with a question about your wool spinning or a lecture on the dangers of idle hands. She remembers the Republic and doesn't trust the empire, the neighbors, or you. But it's not just family you have to worry about. In a society obsessed with honor and reputation, everyone is a stakeholder in your purity. Some families even employ discreet spies, usually older women with nothing better to do, whose main job is to report back if you so much as tie your sandal incorrectly in public. They are everywhere. Lurking by the forum, hanging around the bathhouse, or peering over the garden wall like judgmental pigeons. Worried about making friends? Good luck. Group gatherings of girls are strictly supervised. The second someone giggles too loudly, an adult appears. Private conversations are interrupted with offers of fruit, and the chances of whispering a secret to your best friend without being overheard are about as good as finding a clean street in downtown Rome. And heaven forbid you try to write a letter. All correspondence is subject to inspection. If you receive a note, It's opened by your mother and read aloud at the family table. So if you ever wondered what the opposite of privacy is, there you go. Even your dreams aren't safe. Your sleep is monitored for suspicious restlessness, because everyone knows that girls who toss and turn at night are either sick or plotting romance. Sometimes, the surveillance is less about suspicion and more about ceremony. Festivals, processions, and public rituals are prime time for chaperones to shine. You are paraded in front of eligible families, with your mother giving a running commentary on your posture, your smile, and whether you remembered to tuck in your sash. At the end of the day, your social standing is measured by how many potential scandals you avoided. 0 is the goal. Anything more is cause for an emergency meeting. It's exhausting, but you become skilled at the daily Olympics of avoidance and compliance. Dodging the watchful eyes, perfecting the art of bland conversation, and learning to smile without saying anything incriminating. By the time you make it back to your room, such as it is, you're ready for the sweet relief of sleep as long as you don't snore suspiciously. So if you're the kind of person who values your privacy, just remember, being a virgin in ancient Rome was less about innocence and more about successfully running a never-ending gauntlet of surveillance. Privacy isn't just a luxury, it's a legend. Welcome to the world of tunics and, if you're lucky, the stola, basically the Roman equivalent of a wearable "I'm not married yet" billboard. Virgins get their own dress code, which is about as flattering as a burlap sack and twice as breathable. Try not to trip on your hem in public, that's how rumors start. Your first lesson in Roman fashion is simple. You don't get to choose. Your mother picks out your clothing, your grandmother adjusts it, and your father weighs in only to remind you not to stain anything, because linen doesn't grow on trees. It actually does, sort of. But don't mention that unless you want a lecture on the price of flax. Each layer you put on is a reminder to the world and yourself that you're not just a daughter, but a future investment. The goal isn't comfort or expression, the goal is signal. This one's available for marriage, but absolutely not for fun. The classic look for an unmarried Roman girl starts with the basic tunica, a straight up and down garment that's roughly as figure-flattering as a feed sack and only slightly less itchy. If you're from a well-off family, you get to add a palla, a kind of draped shawl, over your shoulders. It's equal parts cloak, blanket, and portable privacy screen. If you're truly lucky, or your parents are paranoid, you get the full stola ensemble, a long overdress cinched with a belt so high it's practically an underarm holster. There are no sparkles, no glitter, and definitely no statement jewelry. If your bangle makes a sound, your mother will remove it and probably your allowance. Roman society loves to codify everything, including innocence. Color matters. Pale colors, whites, creams, pale yellows, are preferred, making you look like a soft-boiled egg with opinions about grain prices. Reds, purples, and bright dyes are reserved for married women, priestesses, or the kind of working girls who could get you in trouble just by standing next to you at the market. Even your hair gets in on the act. As a respectable virgin, your hair must be worn up, usually in tight braids that double as a medieval head massage. Forget curling irons or fancy pins. Your accessories are utilitarian, often homemade, and secured with the ferocity of a gladiator's grip. Let's talk about footwear, because the Romans certainly did. You get basic sandals, sometimes little more than leather soles tied up with strips of hide. If your family is showing off, maybe you get a touch of embroidery, just enough to say, we're not poor, but we're still humble. The downside? Every step on the dusty Roman roads leaves your feet coated in a fine layer of whatever passed for sidewalk in ancient Rome: dust, goat droppings, and, occasionally, bits of yesterday's garum. Socks? Not a chance. Toe comfort is for married women and people with no reputation to lose. Now, let's discuss modesty panels. Yes, that's right. Special cloth flaps or extra layers to ensure you don't reveal so much as an elbow. The more fabric, the better. Too much breeze, and the next day everyone at the forum is whispering about that one time at the Saturnalia festival. If you're especially unlucky, you're required to pin a little amulet called a bulla to your tunic, ostensibly to ward off evil spirits, but really just one more thing for your mother to inspect before you leave the house. Clothing isn't just about hiding your shape, it's about advertising your family's values. Did you wear your palla just so? Good. Did you accidentally flash a bare ankle while stepping over a puddle? The gods weep, and so does your mother. Dress code violations are serious. One rogue gust of wind, and you're the hot topic in every gossip circle from the bathhouse to the market square. And if you're feeling rebellious, don't. One attempt at personal style, a colourful sash, a flash of borrowed jewellery, and your mother will descend like the Furies, reminding you that the only thing worse than being noticed for the wrong reason is being noticed at all. The safest move? Keep your head down, your hem up, and your opinions to yourself. Yet, for all its discomfort and absurdity, the uniform does have a hidden upside. There's a strange safety in anonymity. Under layers of linen and social expectation, you learn the subtle art of blending in. The world sees your dress before it sees you, and sometimes that's a relief. So, if you think dress codes at your old school were strict, just remember, Roman virginity fashion is a masterclass in camouflage, family branding, and strategic tripping avoidance. Survive it, and you can survive anything except, maybe, laundry day. You'd think ancient Rome, with all its fancy aqueducts, would have invented personal space. Nope. Bathing is a group activity, a social event, and a prime opportunity for everyone to gossip about who saw whose ankle. Good luck not blushing through the steam. Let's set the scene. You enter the thermae, the Roman public baths, with your mother, 2 aunts, your grandmother, and what feels like half your extended family. The first thing you notice isn't the marble or the columns, it's the sheer number of people. Children shriek, matrons chat, and old men, in the male section, thank the gods, debate politics in nothing but a towel. If you were hoping for a quiet soak, you are out of luck. The Roman bathhouse is less spa day and more live episode of Real Housewives of Pompeii. There are no private showers. Instead, you move in packs through a series of steamy, echoing rooms, clutching a battered wooden bucket, a rough cloth, and a hope that you won't trip and fall face first into someone's discarded sandal. The first stop, the apoditerium, or changing room, where you surrender your clothes to a slave or attendant, who absolutely will judge the state of your undertunic, and may even comment on it to anyone within earshot. Pro tip: make sure you haven't sewn last month's snack into a hidden pocket. You head for the tepidarium, a warm, humid chamber where women of all ages gather to talk, compare jewellery, and size each other up. You're required to make small talk while you try to keep your eyes averted from the city's reigning gossip queens. If you think small-town beauty salons are ruthless, you haven't seen Roman matrons armed with nothing but opinions and too much free time. If you're a virgin, there's an extra layer of awkwardness. Ancient Romans were obsessed with purity, and that means every time you enter the baths, you're being silently evaluated. Are you modest? Do you keep your eyes down? Are you too quick to laugh at someone's joke? Or worse, do you draw attention by blushing at an innocent compliment? Every movement is analysed. Cross your legs the wrong way, and you're suddenly the subject of a 3-day rumour cycle. Now for the strigil, a curved metal scraper used to remove dirt and oil. Your mother demonstrates with the skill of someone who's had to clean up after a Saturnalia feast, while you try not to wince as she scrapes away more dignity than grime. The bath attendant might even offer unsolicited advice about good posture and appropriate modesty. As if that's going to help when you're naked in a cloud of steam, surrounded by women who all seem to have memorized your birth chart. Then, the plunge into the caldarium, the hot room. Here, the temperature is just below boil an egg, and privacy drops to absolute zero. The walls drip, your skin turns pink, and the only escape is to make yourself as small and unremarkable as possible. You listen to the chatter, who's getting married, whose daughter was seen talking to a flute player who wore last year's sash to the spring festival. You're just hoping no one mentions your name, especially in the context of the word ankle. Bathing is also where you learn family secrets and all the neighborhood scandals. It's a living newspaper, updated with every splash and whispered complaint. But don't think for a second you're safe if you keep your mouth shut. Staying quiet means people will talk about you even more, usually in the language of raised eyebrows and pointed looks. Someone's always watching, and yes, they notice that you hesitated before stepping into the cold pool. And when you're finally clean, in theory, most of the grime has just been relocated. It's back to the changing room, where you're expected to rewrap yourself in layers and pretend nothing about this experience has been emotionally scarring. Your hair is damp, your cheeks are red, and your reputation is hopefully still intact. On the way home, your mother reviews the outing like a military debriefing. Did you say hello to Mrs. Calpurnia? Did you avert your eyes when the baker's wife entered the room? Was that a giggle or a cough? In the end, Roman bath time is less about hygiene and more about surviving an obstacle course of etiquette, surveillance, and ancient social media. You emerge clean, yes, but mostly you're just relieved to escape without having become tomorrow's cautionary tale. If you want real privacy, your only hope is to wait until everyone else is asleep and try for a quick wash in a rain barrel. Just don't let your mother catch you, or you'll never hear the end of it. If you're unlucky, or very lucky, depending who you ask, you could be chosen as a Vestal Virgin. Your new hobbies, tending sacred flames, avoiding men at all costs, and living under house arrest with 6 of your closest, equally anxious friends. At least the snacks are free. Let's rewind a bit. The day the priest shows up at your house, your parents try to look humble, but everyone knows they've been secretly bragging about your potential for weeks. Suddenly, you're swept away to a marble temple, sworn to 30 years of service, and handed a new wardrobe, white robes, woolen headbands, and the fashion-forward Bulla amulet. Instead of playing knucklebones in the garden, you're reciting prayers and getting a crash course in sacred fire maintenance. Because in Rome, nothing says coming of age like being locked in a temple with a fire that literally can't go out. The rules? Let's just say they're strict enough to make your old family chaperones seem chill. You're not allowed to smile at men, talk to men, or even think too hard about men. In fact, if you so much as catch a whiff of aftershave during a festival, you're supposed to retreat to your special quarters and pray until the feeling passes. There are surprise inspections, endless ceremonies, and a general sense that the gods themselves are peeking in through the curtains to make sure you haven't sneezed during the 3rd hour of ritual chanting. But on the bright side, status. Vestal virgins are the closest thing Rome has to celebrity nuns. You get front row seats at public games, special privileges at the market, and the right to pardon condemned prisoners as long as you do it before the executioner sharpens his axe. The city steps aside when you walk by. Even consuls and senators bow their heads, partly out of reverence and partly because they're terrified of bringing down a curse if they offend you. Your family, meanwhile, gets to tell everyone at the forum that their daughter is one of the most sacred women in the empire, a social media brag if there ever was one. Let's not sugarcoat it, though. The job comes with pressure that would make a gladiator's knees shake. The sacred fire must never, ever go out. If it does, the entire empire could be doomed, at least according to every old woman you've ever met. So you wake up in the middle of the night to check the embers, triple-check the kindling, and pray you never fall asleep on duty. Rumor has it a girl once nodded off and woke up to find half of Rome's priesthood in her room, holding buckets of emergency ashes and looking deeply disappointed. Your fellow Vestals? Think of them as a combination of roommates, co-workers, and a built-in support group for high-stakes candle management. You eat together, sleep in adjoining cells, and try not to get on each other's nerves during the 87th consecutive day of chanting. There's always one overachiever who insists on extra slow, dramatic prayers, and another who somehow manages to accidentally be absent during firewood hauling duty. Gossip, of course, happens, usually whispered behind veils while the head priest isn't listening. The snacks, though, are real. Temple kitchens are legendary for their honey cakes, spiced nuts, and the occasional fruit imported from faraway lands. You learn to eat quickly, since half your meals are interrupted by bells, parades, or someone remembering an urgent goat sacrifice. It's not all bread and honey, though. Dietary restrictions keep you from sampling the latest fermented fish sauce at the market. And don't get caught hiding a fig tart in your sleeve. Ancient Rome does not mess around when it comes to contraband pastries. On paper, being a Vestal sounds like a sweet deal, unless you're not so good at rules. There's the not-so-minor issue of what happens if you break your vow. Let's just say that being buried alive in a secret underground room with a loaf of bread for company is a real occupational hazard. Ancient Romans didn't believe in second chances for sacred trust. One mistake and your headline news, lesson material, and a cautionary tale for centuries. Still, the rituals are impressive. The robes are stylish in a don't touch me, I'm holy sort of way, and for the first time in your life, no one cares if you spill a little olive oil on your tunic. The pressure is high, but at least you don't have to dodge unwanted suitors, suspicious aunts, or the relentless matchmaking of everyday Roman life. So if you ever thought your job was stressful, just be glad you're not responsible for the fate of the empire and the eternal flame while living in a house full of sleep-deprived virgins and endless honey cake. In ancient Rome, sacred duty is just another word for hope you like, group projects. Ancient Rome invented the rumor mill. If you so much as glance at a gladiator for half a second too long, your social standing drops faster than a Roman interest rate. Virginity is currency, and you're constantly at risk of devaluation by whisper campaign. From the moment you're old enough to understand words like modesty and family honor, you realize that your real full-time job isn't spinning wool or learning prayers, it's crisis management. The Roman world runs on social credit, and the smallest mistake can send your reputation into freefall faster than you can say, "Whoops, I tripped." Every conversation, every walk to the forum, every time you pass by the market stalls, there's a wall of eyes quietly calculating, is she still respectable? Has she smiled at someone she shouldn't? Is that a new bulla, or has she been hiding it in her sleeve? The rumor mill is relentless and strangely efficient. The minute you leave your house, your behavior is everyone's favorite subject. The neighbor's grandmother has the surveillance skills of a modern intelligence agency, and she's not above adding a few spicy details for extra drama. Did you linger too long picking out figs? Congratulations, now you're interested in the fig seller's nephew. Wave at your cousin across the street, and the whole neighborhood wonders which family you're secretly courting. And heaven forbid you're seen speaking to a gladiator, even accidentally. Those men might be celebrities, but they're absolutely off limits for respectable girls. By sunset, you've flirted with danger, and your mother is getting apologetic notes from women she barely knows. If you think you can outpace the rumor mill, think again. News travels faster than a chariot race, and it's always slightly more scandalous by the time it gets to your front door. The original version might have been, she smiled politely, but by dinner it's she winked, and by breakfast the next day, she eloped with the baker's son and half the household silver. It's not just idle talk. Your entire future could be derailed by a single whisper. A reputation for virtue is everything, and once a shadow of doubt creeps in, good luck getting rid of it. The rumor circuit runs through every layer of society: the bathhouse, the marketplace, the temple, and especially family gatherings. There's an entire subgenre of Roman gossip devoted to decoding glances, analyzing blushing patterns, and speculating about whether your dowry will have to be discounted. Your aunts compare notes on your posture. The local matchmakers peer over their wine cups, ready to strike you off the eligible list at the first hint of impropriety. Of course, you try to play it safe. Keep your eyes down, your voice quiet, and your route to the market as direct as possible. You perfect the art of polite indifference, nodding at friends without accidentally engaging in flirtation. There's an entire etiquette guide for picking up dropped items without being accused of dramatic displays. And when your mother says, "Don't draw attention," you take it seriously One accidental laugh at the wrong time, and suddenly you're the star of this season's hottest gossip scroll. But there's another side to the coin. If you manage to stay above the fray, never embroiled in drama, never the subject of whispered tales, you might just find yourself with the opposite problem. Is she too cold? Too aloof? Does she think she's better than us? In Rome, you can't win. The spectrum runs from scandalous to suspiciously boring, with little room for normal human error. Sometimes, it feels like your life is an endless episode of Who Wants to Avoid a Scandal. Except the host is every woman in your neighborhood, and the prizes are either maintained reputation or a very early marriage to someone with no sense of humor. The only upside is everyone else is suffering through the same ridiculous scrutiny. You and your friends bond over the daily game of rumor roulette, secretly cheering when the town gossips move on to someone else, even if it's just for a day. Still, the anxiety is real. Ancient Rome didn't invent cancel culture, but it sure perfected it. And in the end, all you can do is laugh about it quietly with your closest confidants, behind closed doors, out of earshot, and definitely out of the bathhouse steam, because even your giggle could become tomorrow's headline. Survive the rumor mill, and you've basically completed the ancient Roman equivalent of crisis PR training, except your only tool is a very convincing poker face and a mother with a sixth sense for drama. In a Roman household, sibling rivalry isn't just about who gets the last fig. It's about who gets married first, to whom, and how loudly your mother can compare your prospects. If you have an older sister, pray she ties the knot quickly, so the spotlight can move on. Every day in a Roman home is a strategic contest, a high-stakes board game where the pieces are your siblings and the currency is future weddings. The minute you start looking vaguely marriageable, the household transforms into a low-key matchmaking agency, run by your parents, with your mother doubling as CEO, chief negotiator, and resident gossip. Daughters are sorted into nearly ready and work in progress. Sons are valued too, but everyone knows the pressure is highest for the girls. A daughter safely and respectably married is a family's golden ticket. A daughter who lingers too long on the shelf is a source of existential dread, especially for mothers who care what the neighbors think, which is every Roman mother. Older siblings always set the tone. If your big sister is still at home, her romantic status is the family's open wound. Every failed courtship or broken betrothal is analyzed at length, dissected by aunts, and quietly added to the running tally of why we can't have nice things. Your older sister's dowry is a constant topic at dinner. If only we could add another jug of olive oil, perhaps Lucius would reconsider. You listen, silently praying she'll accept the next offer, even if it's from that balding cheese merchant with suspiciously shiny sandals, because as long as she's single, you remain invisible. Once she's off the market, all eyes turn to you, and suddenly you're next in line. And, make no mistake, Roman mothers love a comparison. Your prospects, posture, and potential are all measured against your siblings. Your brother learned his Latin by age 7. Why do you still struggle with declensions? Your cousin Flavia married a senator's son, and she never slouched at the loom. There's always a relative who did it better, younger, or with a larger dowry. At some point, you start measuring your own worth by these family legends, even if you know, deep down, that half of it is exaggerated. That married at 14 story? She was actually 16, and the senator was mostly interested in her father's vineyards. Meanwhile, brothers get their own brand of rivalry. But the stakes are different. Boys are expected to be clever, ambitious, and, eventually, rich. There's pressure, of course, but nobody's worried about whether Gaius will be spoiled if he takes too long to pick a bride. In fact, if he brings home a little scandal, everyone chuckles and calls it boys being boys. Meanwhile, if you so much as glance at a suitor before your father gives the nod, it's a family emergency. Occasionally, sibling rivalry takes an unexpected turn. Alliances. If you and your sister get along, miracles happen. You might secretly root for each other, share inside information about potential suitors, or help each other look just the right amount of modest at public festivals. Nothing bonds siblings like surviving a marriage market together, unless of course you're competing for the same eligible bachelor, in which case the loom becomes a battleground and subtle sabotage is the sport of the season. Even the little ones get in on the action. Younger siblings delight in reminding everyone that they'll never be as old as you, and occasionally spill your secrets in exchange for honey cakes or, in a real betrayal, just for fun. The family dynamic is a constant teeter-totter of alliances, rivalries, and shifting alliances, all choreographed by your parents' ambitious plans. But the real stress test comes at social events, festivals, weddings, and public gatherings. Everyone watches to see which daughter is catching, whose eye, who's wearing the latest bulla, and which sibling gets invited to dance first. The family's collective dignity depends on how gracefully you handle this public audition. Did your sister get a smile from a senator's son? Great. Unless he looks your way next, then it's a crisis. Did your brother recite poetry without tripping over his toga? Prepare for months of hearing about it. At the end of the day, Roman sibling rivalry is less about affection and more about survival. The faster your older sister marries, the sooner you get your turn, and the sooner your mother can shift her anxieties to the next child in line. In this family relay, the prize is not the laurel wreath, but the blessed moment when you're no longer the subject of dinner conversation. So, if you ever think your siblings are competitive, just be glad your place in the family isn't dependent on how well you navigate the ancient Roman wedding market. Because in Rome, family drama isn't just entertainment, it's the main event. You reach prime marrying age, about 14, give or take a traumatic puberty, and suddenly your father is fielding offers like a used chariot salesman. Each suitor is judged by his toga's whiteness, his father's political clout, and whether he brings a decent cheese tray. The great Roman marriage market is less a romantic journey and more a well-choreographed business transaction, complete with nervous negotiations and the ever-present threat of someone bringing up your childhood tendency to eat dirt. One day you're playing knucklebones with your friends. The next, your mother is carefully inspecting you for any evidence of sunburn or social awkwardness before you're paraded through a festival in your best eligible attire. Let's talk about the process. First, there's the scouting phase, in which every mother in the neighborhood suddenly becomes an amateur talent scout, scanning crowds for signs of promising young men. They're looking for the basics: good family, solid income, and the sort of jawline that photographs well on a coin. But don't be fooled. The real currency of the Roman marriage market is connections. How many senators your father knows, who owes whom a favor, and whether your third cousin's father-in-law's friend has a spare villa near the coast. Your father, meanwhile, adopts the air of a seasoned negotiator, even if the closest he's come to business is haggling over olive oil in the forum. He stands by the door during festivals, arms crossed, looking over potential sons-in-law as if he's inspecting livestock. Did they iron their toga? Are their sandals free of suspicious stains? How's their handshake? Firm, but not too familiar. Bonus points if the boy's father is a judge, a general, or has enough political pull to get your uncle out of goat-related legal trouble. Now, the parade of suitors begins. Some arrive with elaborate gifts, fresh figs, bolts of linen, or for the truly ambitious, a cheese tray so artfully arranged it practically guarantees a second interview. You're expected to make polite conversation, display your embroidery, and laugh at jokes about Saturnalia feasts, all while keeping your posture absolutely perfect. Slouch, and your mother will pinch you from behind the curtain, just out of sight. Then comes the extended vetting process. Your family isn't just marrying you off, they're merging empires, or at least pooling livestock. Your mother interrogates the prospective in-laws about everything from their wine cellar to the health of their household chickens. If there's even a whisper of scandal, say, an uncle who lost a fortune gambling or a cousin who ran off with a poet, you're advised to smile politely and never mention it again. If the boy's family is especially keen, they might even bring out the good honey cakes, the ones reserved for days when the gods seem particularly fickle. And don't think you have any say in this. Your opinion is noted, but only considered if it lines up with your father's. Try to object and you're likely to get a gentle reminder about your duty to the family, Rome, and possibly the gods themselves. Marry well, they say, and you secure your family's future. Marry poorly, and you'll hear about it every time your cousin's wedding comes up for the next decade. Throughout it all, you're constantly reminded of the stakes. The marriage market isn't just about romance or compatibility. It's about reputation, alliance, and making sure nobody in your family has to eat substandard cheese for the rest of their lives. If you're lucky, your suitor is kind, has at least some conversational skills, and isn't old enough to remember when Julius Caesar was just that kid who won't shut up about Gaul. By the time your marriage is arranged, you're exhausted, your cheeks hurt from forced smiles, and you've sampled enough dried fruit to last a lifetime. The deal is struck, the contract's signed, and your future is sealed with a handshake and maybe a goat. The ancient Roman version of happily ever after starts here, assuming, of course, that the cheese tray was up to standard. Forget romantic love. Your value is now calculated in land, livestock, and hopefully not a warehouse full of questionable olive oil. Dowries are stressful for everyone, except your uncle, who still owes your father money. The minute you're of age, which, let's be honest, in ancient Rome is more about surviving puberty than turning a specific number, your parents' lives become a never-ending episode of The Price is Right. Daughter edition. Forget what you want in a partner. It's all about what you bring to the table, literally. And the table had better be marble, not pine. Let's start with the basics. A dowry isn't just a nice tradition, it's a full-blown financial transaction that decides whether your marriage is a step up, a step down, or a spectacular faceplant for the family name. Your father spends months, sometimes years, squirreling away funds, counting sheep, and arguing with distant relatives about the relative value of that patch of grapevines you inherited from Great-Aunt Plortia. Silver is always good. Land is even better. But livestock? That's where things get complicated, because no one wants to be remembered as the family who sent their daughter off with 3 goats and a donkey that only walks in circles. The negotiations themselves are an event. You, of course, are not invited. Instead, you listen from the other room as your father debates the finer points of your personal worth. 2 plots of land, 10 sheep, and the small olive grove near the river. The suitor's father counters, "We'll accept the land, but not the olive grove. Too many bandits." Add in 6 amphorae of wine and a slave who knows how to keep bees. Your mother sits nearby, tallying numbers on a wax tablet and occasionally rolling her eyes so hard you can hear it through the wall. Every now and then, your uncle chimes in with helpful suggestions, usually involving debts he hasn't paid and assets no one can actually find. And then there's the dreaded inventory. Every pillowcase, every jug, every string of pearls is listed out for both families to approve. You've never seen your family's possessions so organized, and never will again. There are last-minute panics. Where did we put the second best platter? Is the sewing basket full? Or did your cousin borrow all the needles? Are we sure the cow is still alive? Your future happiness depends on a parade of objects, each more random than the last. If your family can't produce enough goods, it's not just a financial setback, it's a matter of shame. No one wants to be the talk of the forum for the wrong reasons. Meanwhile, you're expected to keep your emotions in check. Nervous? Hide it? Excited? Don't show it. You must be the picture of calm, modest dignity, while your future gets weighed and measured like a basket of figs at market. Your friends send you coded messages. Did your father remember the gold clasp? Don't let them forget the good wool. Everyone has a horror story, someone's cousin who got shortchanged on wine, or an aunt whose entire dowry was lost when a donkey ate the contract. And let's not forget, a dowry isn't a gift for you. It's essentially a security deposit in case your marriage collapses or, God forbid, you outlive your husband. If things go south, the dowry, or what's left of it after your husband's investments, is supposed to come back to your family. Good luck with that. There's a reason Roman lawyers were always in business. By the end, everyone is exhausted, your uncle has tried to borrow money again, and you're still not sure if you're marrying a nice young man or just a very strategic cheese tray. In Rome, your worth is tallied in coin, cows, and kitchenware. A reminder that marriage, at least on paper, is less about hearts and flowers and more about calculators and panic. So next time you complain about splitting the bill on a date, spare a thought for the Roman virgins whose futures depended on whether their family could scrape together an extra amphora of olive oil, preferably one that didn't already smell like next year's tax problems. Ancient Rome's obsession with purity means there are actual, horrifying tests for virginity, most of which involve nosy relatives, midwives, and the complete absence of dignity. You've never wanted to disappear into a bathhouse drain more in your life. Let's start with the basics. The Roman world isn't just interested in the concept of virtue, it's downright obsessed with verifying it. Forget privacy. Your entire extended family, and probably a few strangers, have a vested interest in the state of the goods. At some point in your late adolescence, or if you're unlucky, the morning after your wedding, someone will decide it's time for the ultimate humiliation, the virginity check. The mechanics are as medieval as you can imagine. Sometimes it's a midwife or an older family member who's been through this rodeo before, often a woman with more opinions than teeth. The scene is set: a darkened room, a gaggle of chattering women, and a mother so tense she might shatter a pottery jug with sheer anxiety. You are led in like a sacrificial lamb, and the inspection begins. No one's exactly sure what they're looking for. Some say it's a certain look about the girl. Others talk vaguely about signs that only a true expert could spot. No one trusts science, but everyone trusts rumor and an aunt who swears she can just tell. If it's before a marriage, the test is meant to assure the groom's family that their investment isn't about to go up in smoke. If it's after, it's all about checking for evidence that you were, in fact, properly untouched up until the ceremony. Some families even examine bedsheets for blood, as if biology always cooperates with Roman social standards. And God's help you, if it doesn't, suddenly you're at the center of a crisis meeting and your entire worth is being debated over last night's laundry. Let's be clear, none of this is medical. It's a grab bag of folklore, wishful thinking, and methods that would make a modern gynecologist weep into their latte. If a girl passes, there's a collective sigh of relief, a little family celebration, and maybe even a silent prayer of thanks to Vesta. If she fails, chaos ensues. Accusations fly, reputations crumble, and the poor girl in question is often left wondering if moving to Gaul and becoming a hermit might be a better option. Meanwhile, the double standards are Olympic level. Boys, of course, face no such scrutiny. Nobody's lining up to inspect the groom's purity. In fact, the only thing anyone expects from him is that he showed up to the ceremony without obvious signs of a recent bar fight. It's a girls-only club, this particular nightmare, and there are no membership perks. The worst part isn't even the embarrassment. It's the anxiety leading up to it. Everyone drops hints. Are you ready for your special day? Have you been good? You know what's at stake, right? It's less supportive, more ominous. Even your friends tiptoe around the subject, sending you looks of deep sympathy and passing along horror stories about distant cousins who didn't pass the test and now spend their days weaving alone in a corner of the villa. After the ordeal, you're expected to bounce back immediately, smile at your new in-laws, thank your mother for her concern, and act as though nothing happened. No one wants to talk about how invasive and ridiculous the whole thing is. Instead, it becomes just another part of growing up in ancient Rome, like learning to spin wool, avoid scandals, and keep your elbows tucked in during dinner. Of course, there are some who try to cheat the system. Rumor has it that more than one clever girl has faked her way through with strategic injuries, a little beetroot juice on the bedsheets, or just an especially convincing performance. These urban legends are whispered among friends but never, ever mentioned to parents, unless you want to add witchcraft to your list of accusations. So next time you're grateful for the lack of family involvement in your dating life, spare a thought for the Roman girls who faced the most awkward inspection of all. In ancient Rome, passing the test was less about purity and more about performance, luck, and surviving an ordeal that really should have stayed in the bathhouse drain where it belonged. There's no internet, no books, just cryptic stories, bizarre warnings, and the occasional deeply unsettling mosaic. Most of what you learn is wrong, terrifying, or both. Welcome to the world of ancient Roman sex ed, where knowledge is power and ignorance is apparently safer. Your first lesson in the facts of life arrives courtesy of your older cousin, who learned everything she knows from an even older cousin, who in turn picked it up from a merchant's wife who once lived in Athens. The chain of information is less source-verified and more long game of telephone with bonus blushing. Real answers are scarce. Everyone has questions, but no one asks them out loud. Not unless you want to end up the star of this month's neighborhood rumor. Statues are everywhere, and most of them aren't subtle. The gods are naked, the heroes are naked, and the bathhouse is, well, let's just say you get an anatomy lesson every time you visit. But as for what all those parts are supposed to do together, the official answer from your mother is, ask me no questions and I'll tell you no lies. This is immediately followed by a vague warning about not getting too close to the bakery at dusk, as if the smell of bread alone could start a scandal. There are no pamphlets, no diagrams, and definitely no birds and bees talk, unless you count your grandmother's cryptic tale about a girl who looked too long at a rooster and was never the same again. You're left piecing together half-remembered prayers to Venus, the goddess of love, with whispered stories from other girls about what actually happens on the wedding night. The stories are inconsistent, often contradictory, and always terrifying. Some say there's pain, some say it's like a chariot crash, others claim it's over before you have time to panic. Sometimes the only information you get comes from the mosaics in certain houses. Let's call them adult houses. You're told never to look at them, which of course guarantees that every girl at some point sneaks a peek and then regrets it immediately. You leave more confused than before, quietly wondering why the people in the pictures seem so happy about all the awkwardness. Your mother does try to help, in her own unhelpful way. Her sex ed class is a mix of folklore, superstition, and practical advice, most of which boils down to don't do anything until you're married, and then just hope for the best. She might hand you an amulet for luck, offer a list of foods to avoid, oysters are out, boiled cabbage is apparently safe, and end with a warning never to trust poets, sculptors, or anyone with especially curly hair. Men are no better. Boys are told to be bold and learn from experience, which usually means more questions and more bravado. Nobody ever admits to knowing less than everyone else, and half the time, the loudest boys in the forum know the least. The rest of the time, you're just supposed to keep your head down, spin your wool, and look mysterious. If you're lucky, your best friend will share a secret tip she overheard from her cousin's maid, and you'll both agree to never repeat it, mostly because it sounds impossible. If you do work up the courage to ask a married woman for advice, prepare yourself. She'll either giggle for 5 minutes, warn you that men are just like big, loud babies, or, if you're really unlucky, launch into a full theatrical reenactment involving fruit, household objects, and metaphors that are somehow both too obvious and not obvious enough. You leave with more questions than answers and a firm resolve never to ask again. So you get creative. You invent hand signals with your friends. You trade wild theories about what happens after the wedding feast, and you try not to panic every time someone mentions the bridal bed. Your entire education is a patchwork quilt of myths, rumors, and the occasional horrifying fact. And the night before your wedding, you're likely to find yourself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, and wishing Venus herself would just send you a step-by-step scroll. In ancient Rome, sex education is less education and more emotional endurance test. You know just enough to be scared, not enough to be prepared, and exactly as much as your mother thinks you deserve. Welcome to adulthood, ready or not. You're told certain foods will keep you pure or ready for marriage, which means a lot of boiled lentils and moral fibre. No garlic breath, no wine before noon, and for the love of Jupiter, avoid oysters at all costs. Aphrodisiacs are for married women, or so they say. In ancient Rome, your diet isn't just about staying alive, it's a daily test of virtue. Your mother and grandmother have strong opinions about what lands on your plate, and every meal is a strategic balancing act between nutrition, social signaling, and not making a scene in the middle of dinner. The rules are endless. Root vegetables are grounding, honey is sweet but not too sweet, and fruit is fine, unless you look like you're enjoying it too much. If anyone sees you lingering near the fig basket, expect a sudden and urgent discussion about moderation. The centerpiece of the virgin diet is the humble lentil. Lentils are safe, bland, and considered a metaphor for your current life. Filling, but not exactly exciting. They're boiled, mashed, and served with a drizzle of olive oil, never too much, because extravagance is unseemly. Bread makes a daily appearance, but only the brown, coarse kind. Anything white and fluffy is reserved for feast days or someone else's wedding. Your family believes that the rougher the crust, the more likely you are to make a good wife. Try not to break a tooth. Garlic is strictly off limits, allegedly because it inflames passions, a fate worse than death if you ask your mother, but also because nobody wants a daughter who smells like a gladiator's armpit. Onions get a similarly suspicious glance. Instead, you load up on chickpeas and cabbage, foods with the twin advantages of being inexpensive and considered cooling. There's no official explanation for why cooling is good for virgins, but it's repeated so often you don't dare question it. Wine is an even trickier subject. Everyone in Rome drinks it, including children, but there are strict rules for girls. No wine before noon, and even then it must be watered down until it tastes like grape-scented regret. Drinking too much is a slippery slope straight to ruin, according to your grandmother, who claims to have seen a girl ruined by raisins at her cousin's wedding feast. Water, meanwhile, is eyed with suspicion because, well, you've seen what flows through the streets. When fasting season comes around, the rules get even stricter. Bread and water, maybe a handful of beans, and no joy. Fasting is supposed to clear your soul, but mostly it just makes you cranky and lightheaded. If you're caught sneaking so much as a dried fig, you get a lecture about virtue in adversity, and a long story about an ancestor who once survived 3 weeks on nothing but boiled nettles and her own sense of moral superiority. Then there are the dangerous foods, the ones whispered about in the market and forbidden at your family table. Oysters, artichokes, pomegranates, even certain kinds of cheese are considered too risky for virgins. Aphrodisiacs are for married women, or, more likely, for the sort of women who become a cautionary tale in family legend. If you're ever offered a dish with too many spices, take it as a compliment and a warning. Either someone's trying to fatten you up for a proposal, or they want to see if you'll start giggling uncontrollably. Despite all these rules, you find ways to cope. Maybe you and your friends sneak bites of honey cake when the grown-ups aren't looking, or share secret recipes for neutral stews that are neither too spicy nor too bland. You swap stories about what the rich girls eat and dream of the day you can taste whatever you want, preferably without an audience and a side of judgment. So, the next time you're staring down a bowl of boiled lentils, remember, you're not just eating for health, you're eating for your reputation. In ancient Rome, purity is a flavor, and it tastes like discipline, bland vegetables, and the faint, forbidden memory of garlic. Enjoy your meal, and try not to look too excited. Your closest friends are fellow virgins, and you share everything, fears, dreams, and a healthy dread of matchmaking festivals. You invent games like Guess Who Will Be Married Off First, but it's less fun than it sounds. In ancient Rome, the only thing more anxiety-inducing than your family's expectations is the reality that every girl in your circle is living the same life. And so, out of necessity and desperation, real friendships are forged, not just out of shared interests, but out of shared survival. Your friends are the ones who sit beside you at the loom, giggle during endless weaving sessions, and silently hold your hand during the world's most awkward religious ceremonies. When your mother starts asking pointed questions about your future, they're the only ones who truly understand the cold sweat that follows. Every afternoon you gather in someone's courtyard or under a patch of shade, stealing moments between chores to compare notes on the latest neighborhood rumors. There's a strange comfort in knowing you're not alone. Everyone's mother has the same suspicious look. Everyone's aunt knows someone who lost her virtue, and everyone's grandmother has a story about an unlucky girl who blinked at the wrong boy and ended up in a convent. Together, you invent secret languages and elaborate hand signals to warn each other when parents or nosy relatives approach. If one of you is targeted by the matchmaking committee at a festival, the rest form a defensive phalanx, swooping in to provide cover or invent a sudden need to refill the water jugs. You share strategies for escaping the worst chores, and everyone knows which friend's kitchen has the best honeycakes hidden away for midnight snacks. Of course, there's competition too. Every time a new suitor comes sniffing around, you all pretend to be thrilled for whoever's suddenly in the spotlight, but deep down, there's a ripple of relief that it's not you. At least not yet. The game of guess who will be married off first is part joke, part genuine terror. You make bets with leftover fig seeds, and every victory is bittersweet. You're happy for your friend, but you know your own turn is coming. There's an unspoken hierarchy to the group. The girls with the wealthiest families, or the most prominent connections, are secretly envied, but also pitied. Their weddings will be grand, but their pressure is even higher. The rest of you find comfort in each other's ordinariness. You bond over the small rebellions, sneaking a taste of wine, giggling too loudly at the baths, or swapping the most outrageous stories you can invent about the boys from the next street over. Sometimes, friendship is simply about survival. When one of you gets sick, the others organize shifts to keep her company, smuggling in soup and news from the outside world. If someone's caught up in a rumor, the group bands together to squash it, or at least distract attention until someone else becomes the main event. If a suitor turns out to be a disaster, you all agree never to mention his name again. There are pacts, alliances, and more than one oath sworn on a sticky piece of honeycake. The best moments come in the quiet evenings, when the chores are done and you can simply exist together, watching the sky turn pink, sharing stories about what you'd do if you were born a boy, or if you could travel beyond Rome. You dream together of a future where you get to pick your own husband, or, even better, where nobody cares at all. These dreams are whispered, never shouted, but they're what keep you sane when everything else feels like it's closing in. In the end, your friendships are lifelines. They help you navigate the churning seas of rumors, chaperones, and ridiculous marriage negotiations. They make the fear bearable and the dull days brighter. So, when you look back on your years as a Roman virgin, it won't be the boiled lentils or the dowry debates you remember. It'll be the girls who laughed, schemed, and survived right along with you. And really, that's a bond worth more than all the olive oil in the empire. Every Roman holiday is an excuse for a massive public gathering, which means endless opportunities to be scrutinized, judged, and introduced to your future husband's extended family. Don't drop your cup. You'll never live it down. The Roman calendar is packed with more holidays than the average modern schoolchild could dream of. Saturnalia, Lupercalia, Floralia. Each comes with its own costumes, rituals, and, most importantly, enormous crowds of people all watching each other and pretending not to. As a respectable Roman virgin, you don't get to lounge at home in your tunic. No, you're pressed, perfumed, and paraded through streets that smell like a blend of incense, spilled wine, and the panic of 100 girls trying not to faint in the midday sun. Preparation for a festival begins days in advance. Your mother will carefully inspect your tunic and palla for stains, send you to the bathhouse whether you need it or not, and issue a long list of instructions about how to stand, where to look, and how loudly to pray. The only thing scarier than being underdressed for a festival is being overdressed. and both are causes for comment. There are whispered reminders about modesty and, of course, about not drawing attention to yourself, which is laughable, considering you're about to be paraded through town like a prize-winning goat. The morning of the festival is chaos. You, your siblings, and half the neighborhood cram into the house as relatives appear out of nowhere, everyone talking at once. There's always an emergency. A lost sandal, a torn sash, someone's hair refusing to stay in an appropriate braid. Your mother's anxiety infects everyone, and you're warned at least 3 times not to spill anything on your clothes or, Jupiter forbid, step in something unspeakable on the way to the forum. Then it's time to join the throngs streaming toward the temples, city squares, or fields, depending on which god is being honored that week. The processions are endless. You shuffle along in a tightly controlled formation, flanked by chaperones, while the city's most vigilant gossips stake out prime viewing spots. The minute you trip on a cobblestone, a chorus of aunties gasps. If you recover gracefully, your mother beams. If not, it'll be mentioned at every family meal until the end of time. At the feast itself, there's a minefield of social rules. You're expected to eat, but not too much. You should laugh at jokes, but never too loudly. Make polite conversation, but never look too interested, unless the conversation involves your future husband, in which case you must look exactly the right amount of interested, but not desperate. And don't get caught eyeing the wine jug. Everyone knows virgins prefer watered grape juice, and the more watered down, the better. The true test comes when you're introduced to eligible bachelors and their formidable mothers. There are rounds of subtle interrogations, inquiries about your needlework, and at least one aunt who pinches your cheek hard enough to leave a mark. If you're lucky, you get through with little more than a minor wardrobe malfunction and a promise to visit someone's country villa in the spring. If not, you find yourself the focus of that most ancient of pastimes, public matchmaking, where 2 families haggle over your virtues as if you're a particularly nice bunch of grapes. And then there are the performances, recitations, dances, or, for the truly unfortunate, singing in front of a crowd. You pray to every god you can name for the ground to open up and swallow you. Your friends whisper encouragement, but you know tomorrow they'll be teasing you about that one high note you missed or how the priest's robe caught on fire at the wrong moment. When it's all finally over, you stagger home, exhausted and overwhelmed, trailed by family members dissecting every moment of the day. Did you see who was talking to whom? Did you notice which boy didn't look away quickly enough? Did you thank the right priest? As you collapse into bed, you're already dreading the next festival. In ancient Rome, social anxiety wasn't just a private feeling, it was a team sport, and every holiday was the championship. So the next time you find yourself nervous at a family barbecue, remember, at least you're not being judged by a city's worth of aunties, half a pantheon, and the ever-watchful eye of your own mother. In ancient Rome, every feast was a final exam in the art of surviving public opinion, with extra gods watching for good measure. Vestal virgins are revered, feared, and held to impossible standards. One wrong move, and it's not just social disgrace. You could be buried alive for breaking your vow, no pressure. To be chosen as a Vestal virgin in ancient Rome is the equivalent of winning the world's most stressful lottery. One day, you're an ordinary girl worrying about your posture at the dinner table. The next, you're whisked away to a marble sanctuary and handed 30 years of high-stakes responsibility. The perks sound impressive. Front row seats at games, seats of honor at banquets, and the right to pardon condemned prisoners on the spot. But every privilege is balanced on the knife edge of public expectation, and those expectations would give even the gods a headache. The rules start simple and get stricter. Your hair is cut short in a special ceremony. You wear snow-white robes and a sacred headband. You are forbidden to swear oaths, spill secrets, or, most importantly, let the sacred flame go out. That fire must burn, unbroken, for the heart of Rome to keep beating. If it does go out, everyone from the high priest to the lowliest beggar believes disaster will follow. So you check the embers in the middle of the night, eyes gritty with fatigue, and live in constant fear of a stray breeze. Or, worse, a fellow Vestal dozing off on duty. Perfection isn't a suggestion. It's a job requirement. Your behavior is watched by priests, senators, and gossipy matrons with nothing better to do. Vestals are expected to glide through crowds with serene dignity, never flustered, never anything less than divine. If you trip on your robe, it's a sign of bad luck for Rome. If you laugh too loudly, some senator's wife claims you're tempting fate. Even a single shadow of impropriety, like glancing too long at a young tribune, could bring down years of suspicion and endless lectures from the chief priestess. Then there's the vow, 30 years of chastity, or else. In a city obsessed with virtue and symbolism, the Vestal's purity is more than personal. It's political, religious, and a constant source of public paranoia. If a Vestal is even rumoured to have broken her vow, the consequences are grim and theatrical. Ancient Romans believed that a broken vow could bring famine, plague, or defeat in war. So if you so much as share a smile with a young man at the games, you'll find yourself under the world's most awkward house arrest, monitored day and night. If, after an investigation, you're found guilty, the punishment is burial alive in a tiny chamber, bread, oil, and water, provided for dignity's sake, but not enough to save you. There's no trial, no second chance, and absolutely no appeals process. The stress is legendary. Vestal virgins are expected to embody divine perfection, while also being human enough to perform daily rituals, mediate disputes, and reassure the population that the gods are, in fact, on Rome's side. You spend hours at the altar, arms aching from holding offerings, then race off to attend banquets, all while avoiding the ever-watchful eyes of both citizens and jealous rivals. The pressure cooker of expectation never lets up. Even within the temple, rivalries fester. Some Vestals are overachievers, others are experts at shifting blame, and everyone's terrified of being the one who forgets to stoke the flame or slips up during a public ceremony. Yet, for all the terror, there are rare moments of freedom. Sometimes you and your fellow Vestals sneak a laugh behind the curtains, share honey cakes after hours, or gossip about the senator's togas. But those moments are fleeting, because perfection, in Rome, is a performance, and the audience is always watching. So, next time you feel stressed about living up to someone else's expectations, just remember, at least nobody's threatening to bury you alive if you forget to change the oil or misplace your keys. In ancient Rome, for a Vestal virgin, there was only one rule: be perfect or else. Spoiler, being a virgin does not excuse you from spinning wool, weaving, and doing endless chores. In fact, your mother expects you to set a good example for the servants, who know more about romance than you ever will. There's a myth, probably started by a bored poet, that virgins in ancient Rome spent their days lounging around in laurel wreaths, practicing the lyre, or composing poetry to imaginary suitors. The reality? You're more likely to spend your days elbow-deep in laundry water, untangling wool, or wrestling with a loom that seems determined to tangle every thread you own. Your life, for all its moral and reputational pressures, is a cycle of domestic labour worthy of an Olympic event. Every morning starts before sunrise with the rattle of a wooden bucket and your mother's enthusiastic reminder that industry is next to piety. Before breakfast, you're sweeping the villa's mosaic floors, shooing away chickens, and praying you don't spill the chamber pot. The work is endless and surprisingly democratic. Whether you're the daughter of a senator or a middling merchant, chores are unavoidable. In fact, the higher your social standing, the more your family expects you to model perfection. Don't slouch at the loom, your mother whispers, as if Jupiter himself might drop by for an inspection. Let's talk laundry. Forget about a washing machine. Your day involves stomping tunics in cold water, scrubbing stains out with clay or ashes, and wringing everything by hand until your arms ache. Some unlucky girls end up washing the men's togas, long, heavy, and always suspiciously stained after a night at the forum. If you're especially unlucky, you get to haul everything down to the public wash basin, where nosy matrons judge both your technique and your reputation. Weaving is the true test of patience and perseverance. The Roman mother is obsessed with having enough homespun cloth, partly for dowries, partly to show off at market, and partly because she's convinced the act of weaving wards off scandal. If you grumble, she'll remind you of the myth of Arachne, who was turned into a spider for her arrogance. If you do well, you might get a rare smile, and the chance to gossip with your friends about who has the ugliest tapestry. The stakes are higher than you'd think. A crooked hem or drop stitch is a public disgrace and future family legend. And then there's food prep. Chopping, pounding, and stirring are all part of your daily education. You're expected to know how to bake bread without burning it, make porridge that isn't too runny, and prepare vegetables with just the right amount of olive oil. Never too much. That's for newlyweds or the terminally rich. No matter how many recipes you learn, your mother insists her way is best, and if you dare to improvise, she'll cite a tragic relative who once oversalted the stew and died unmarried. Of course, you're not alone. There are servants, but your job is to be their supervisor and, more importantly, their moral compass. This is hilarious, considering most servants know the back stairs, the best hiding places, and all the neighborhood gossip. They might even sneak you hints about how to finish your chores faster, always in exchange for secrets or stolen bites of honey cake. Your mother, meanwhile, expects you to set a good example, which apparently means working just hard enough to sweat but not hard enough to look desperate. If there's a silver lining, it's in the camaraderie. Chores are when you and your friends trade news, whisper jokes, and dream up wild stories about running away to Gaul and opening a bakery. You bond over splinters, sore backs, and the art of faking a headache to escape extra spinning. There are small victories, finishing a perfect seam, outsmarting your younger siblings, or finally figuring out how to clean mud off a tunic without creating a new stain. At the end of the day, as you collapse onto a lumpy mattress, you realize that being a model Roman virgin is as much about perfect laundry as perfect morals. So, next time someone tells you that virtue is its own reward, ask them if it comes with laundry service. In ancient Rome, chastity might protect your reputation, but it does absolutely nothing for your chore list. If you so much as sneeze, someone suggests a virgin's remedy, which is usually some combination of honey, goat fat, and a prayer to Venus. No one knows if it works. It's a miracle anyone survived adolescence at all. Welcome to ancient Roman healthcare, where medical advice is a blend of superstition, rumour, and whatever happened to be growing in your neighbour's herb garden that week. If you think your family's home remedies are strange, just wait until your aunt prescribes mashed beans for heartbreak, or your grandmother insists you wear a garlic clove around your neck to keep the impure thoughts away. In Rome, every ailment, real or imagined, has its own elaborate, often embarrassing, ritual cure. The moment you feel a tickle in your throat, the house springs into action. Out comes the honey jar, which is good for everything from coughs to curses. Next, someone will fetch goat fat, a staple in any respectable Roman pantry, believing it can be smeared on rashes, wounds, and, for reasons nobody can explain, the soles of your feet. If you protest, you're scolded for doubting the wisdom of your elders, and reminded that Venus herself once recommended this to a particularly unlucky priestess. True or not, you're covered in goat fat before you can say, "Where's the doctor?" But who needs doctors when you have household magic and a parade of half-remembered rituals? Most Roman families are suspicious of actual physicians, who are usually Greek and always expensive. Instead, you rely on the combined expertise of mothers, aunts, and the occasional neighbour who claims to have the gift. Illness is treated less with medicine and more with ceremony. For a fever, you might be wrapped in wool and left to sweat it out under a pile of blankets, while someone chants a prayer and burns a sprig of rue. For stomach pains, it's a diet of bland, gruel, and more prayers. For headaches, you might end up with a wreath of laurel leaves around your forehead and a stern lecture on the dangers of reading too much poetry. If you get a pimple, a sure sign you're coming of age. Everyone has an opinion. Your mother suggests a poultice of chickpea flour. Your grandmother recommends a nightly rub with olive oil and salt, and your friend swears by a mysterious powder she got from the market. After a week of experimentation, your skin is redder than ever, and you smell like a salad, but you're told this is the price of beauty. And then there are the remedies reserved just for virgins. Feeling faint before a festival? Drink a concoction of boiled mint and rose petals, supposedly guaranteed to keep you upright and modest. Trouble sleeping? Place a poppy flower under your pillow, tie a red thread around your wrist, and recite a prayer to Juno. If you wake up groggy, it means the ritual pulled the bad spirits out, or so you're told. Of course, not every cure is harmless. Sometimes, the search for purity leads to less than pleasant results. Vinegar is poured in ears, strange roots are chewed, and mysterious powders, the less said, the better, are sprinkled on food. If you ever wonder why Roman girls are so tough, it's because you've spent half your life dodging weird brews and the other half surviving them. Boys naturally escape most of this drama. A sneeze for them means a slap on the back and a warning not to fall off their horse. For girls, every ailment is a test of virtue, patience, and just how much goat fat you can stand before losing your will to live. If you recover, it's a sign you're favored by the gods. If not, your mother mutters about city air and threatens to send you to the countryside for a change of scenery. Looking back, it's a wonder any Roman girl made it to adulthood. Every cough was an omen, every rash a crisis, and every remedy a new adventure in discomfort. In ancient Rome, the only thing more dangerous than getting sick was surviving the cure. So the next time someone offers you a home remedy, just be glad it doesn't involve goat fat and a prayer to Venus. Unless, of course, you sneeze. Then all bets are off. Are there male virgins? Sure, but nobody cares unless you're a Vestal Virgin's brother or a future emperor. Boys are expected to gain experience, while girls are expected to remain pure until the paperwork clears. In the grand circus of Roman adolescence, the pressure on girls is relentless and public. But what about the boys? If you're a young Roman male, you can pretty much stroll through puberty with no one tallying up your virtue like a particularly fragile vase. For boys, the rules are more like friendly guidelines, sometimes observed, more often ignored, and always peppered with an understanding wink from the older men in the family. While girls get lectures about modesty, virtue, and the dangers of eating too many grapes, boys get encouragement to see the world, learn about life, and, if they come home with a story that makes the household slaves giggle, that's just part of growing up. There's no badge of honor for male virginity. In fact, admitting to it past the age of about 13 is the social equivalent of confessing you still sleep with a stuffed wolfskin. For a Roman boy, the only thing worse than being inexperienced is being caught trying too hard to hide it. Family dinners for boys are noticeably less stressful. Nobody is quizzing them about who they talk to in the market, whether they blushed at the baker's daughter, or if their tunic was a little too short last Tuesday. Instead, fathers and uncles swap stories about their own wild youth, subtly suggesting that the real goal is to outgrow innocence as quickly as possible. If a young man admits to being untouched, the other men might laugh, clap him on the back, and tell him to hurry up and visit the baths more often. No one's checking his sandals for signs of scandal. The only real exception to this casual attitude is if your sister happens to be a Vestal Virgin, in which case your entire family is under the microscope and your own reputation suddenly matters. Even then, the focus is less on your personal purity and more on not embarrassing your sister, the household, or the gods. For the unlucky few who end up related to a priestess, it's a crash course in guilt by association. Keep your nose clean, avoid public brawls, and for Jupiter's sake, don't start any rumors. But for most Roman boys, virtue is a word reserved for statues and speeches. Boys are expected to get their experience in a variety of ways, usually not discussed in polite company. There are whispered tales of visits to certain houses by the docks, of late-night adventures after the Saturnalia feasts, and of discreet affairs with girls whose families are more lenient or just less attentive. What's important is that boys don't get caught, and if they do, well, boys will be boys. The double standard isn't just alive, it's doing laps in the Circus Maximus. Of course, not all boys are comfortable with the expectation to be bold and adventurous. Some would rather read poetry, learn rhetoric, or avoid the chaos altogether. These boys, the quiet and cautious ones, might get teased or urged to be a man, but nobody is tracking their purity with the same ferocious attention that girls endure. If they reach adulthood without a single scandal to their name, most people just assume they were being discreet or busy with studies. At worst, they're considered odd. At best, they're left alone. If you're destined for greatness, say, as a future senator or emperor, your romantic history will become part of your official story, recited for political points or weaponized by rivals. But even then, the focus is never on innocence. It's about conquests, adventures, and who you manage to annoy along the way. For most Roman men, virginity is simply not a topic worth mentioning. Meanwhile, their sisters, cousins, and friends jump through hoops, guard their reputations, and cross their fingers every time the neighborhood gossips gather. The contrast couldn't be starker. If there's a family crisis, it's never about a boy's virtue, unless, perhaps, he's managed to embarrass himself so spectacularly that even his mother takes notice. In which case, he'll get a stern talking to and maybe an extra chore or two. So the next time you hear about ancient Rome's obsession with purity, remember, it was a one-sided deal. Boys got the freedom to make mistakes. Girls got the lectures, the surveillance, and the ever-present threat of social exile. For male virgins in Rome, the only real curse was being ignored. And in the ancient world, sometimes that was a blessing. If you're caught breaking the rules, the punishment is swift and public. At best, you're married off to an old man in Spain. At worst, you're paraded through town as a cautionary tale for the next generation. Ancient Rome didn't mess around with the concept of reputation. For Roman virgins, the list of rules is longer than a senator's victory speech, and breaking even one can set off a social earthquake. The word scandal is always lurking, ready to pounce at the first sign of impropriety, real or imagined. So, what happens if you slip up? Spoiler alert. It's not subtle, and it's definitely not private. It might start small. Maybe you're caught talking a little too long to a boy in the market, or a nosy neighbor swears she saw you smile at the baker's apprentice. Sometimes it's an honest mistake, tripping and falling into someone's arms, or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. In Rome, evidence is flexible and rumor is ironclad. It doesn't matter if nothing happened. If the gossip machine gets going, you're in trouble. First comes the interrogation. Your mother, flanked by every available female relative, launches a barrage of questions with the intensity of a battlefield general. Where were you? Who saw you? Was your palla pinned properly? You answer, but you know it's already too late. Your father listens in grim silence, calculating damage control and possible dowry discounts. The entire house is on high alert, as if an invading army is about to breach the gates. Then comes the punishment. If you're lucky, a relative term, you're married off in a hurry. Your parents scramble to find a husband who is willing to look the other way in exchange for an especially generous dowry or an urgent relocation to the provinces. Suddenly, Spain doesn't sound so bad, until you realize your new husband is old enough to have been at Caesar's first barbecue and considers soap a modern affectation. If a hasty marriage isn't possible, the consequences get more creative. Public humiliation is a favorite Roman pastime. There are stories of girls being paraded through town with their heads shaved or forced to make offerings at every shrine from here to Ostia. Basically the ancient equivalent of wearing a sandwich board that reads, "Don't be like me." You become a cautionary tale, used by every mother in the neighborhood to frighten their daughters into submission. Remember what happened to Julia when she talked to that flute player? Do you want to end up like her? For the very unlucky, exile is on the table. You might be sent to live with distant relatives in the country, where the only entertainment is counting sheep and avoiding conversation. Sometimes, you're shuffled off to a temple or a convent, spending your days in prayer and your nights regretting that one fateful glance in the forum. If the infraction is truly dire, or your family especially ambitious, you might end up the subject of an official trial, with senators debating your fate while the crowd whispers and stares. None of this is about justice. It's about saving face. Your family's reputation is at stake, and your future is collateral damage. You're expected to accept your fate gracefully, no tears, no protest, just a stoic nod as you pack your things for Spain or step onto the path to the next village. Even your friends, though sympathetic, are told to keep their distance until the scandal cools off. You become a social ghost, proof that the system works for everyone but you. Of course, some girls try to fight back. There are whispered stories of runaways, clever forgeries, or secret pacts made with friends willing to help you disappear for a while. But those are the rare exceptions. Most just accept the punishment and try to survive, hoping that next year's festival will bring fresh gossip and a new cautionary tale to take your place. So, in ancient Rome, breaking the rules isn't just a personal misstep. It's a family crisis, a neighborhood spectacle, and a one-way ticket to public shame. If you ever think your hometown is gossipy, just be glad your mistakes don't end with a forced trip to Spain or a starring role in the local legend. In Rome, the long walk home is more than a metaphor. It's a public event, and everyone's invited. Despite all the rules, romance finds a way. You might get a secret note slipped into your basket or a serenade under your window, until your father finds out and doubles the guard. It's basically Romeo and Juliet, but with worse poetry. In the swirling cauldron of Roman social rules, teenage love is not just forbidden fruit, it's fruit hidden on a shelf, behind a locked door, in a room guarded by your mother, 3 aunts, and an exceptionally nosy neighbor. But that doesn't stop anyone from trying. If anything, the obstacles just make the whole business more exciting and, naturally, a lot more ridiculous. Secret notes are the lifeblood of forbidden Roman romance. Forget texting. Your would-be admirer must rely on clever subterfuge, slipping a wax tablet into your market basket, tucking a message inside a folded napkin at a family banquet, or enlisting your youngest sibling, always ready to accept a bribe of honey cakes, to act as a go-between. The notes themselves are rarely clever, and usually include more references to the gods than actual feelings. Venus herself must have sent you to me, one writes. Another, less poetic, simply rhymes love with dove and runs out of ideas halfway through the message. If you're lucky, the notes stay secret. If you're not, your mother intercepts one, and the next thing you know, you're enduring a 2-hour lecture on the dangers of poets, sculptors, and men with suspiciously good hair. The real punishment, though, is listening to her read the bad poetry aloud, twice, for emphasis, before threatening to tell your father. Meetings are even riskier. Every walk to the forum is fraught with possibility. Your chaperone insists you keep your eyes on your sandals, but you've learned to communicate in sidelong glances, subtle waves, and the strategic dropping of a handkerchief. The smallest interaction, a greeting at the market, a stolen smile at the baths, can set hearts racing and rumour mills churning. Occasionally your admirer goes bold, showing up outside your house after dark to whisper your name under the moonlight. It sounds romantic in theory, until you remember the family dog will not be bribed and the local watchman is your cousin. If you manage a real secret meeting, say, behind the columns at a festival or in the shadowy corner of a busy street, it's brief, awkward, and filled with whispered pleasantries. No matter how passionate the promise is, both of you are constantly on edge, ears pricked for the sound of approaching sandals. There's rarely time for anything more than a quick exchange of tokens, a cheap ring, a faded flower, maybe a carved comb. The tension is half the fun. The other half is knowing you're risking everything for 5 minutes of conversation. Of course, poetry is never far away. Roman boys are raised on Ovid, and they all fancy themselves the next great love poet. The results? Mixed at best. You receive lines about your shining eyes, hair like golden wheat, or, more puzzling, cheeks, as radiant as a well-swept atrium. Sometimes the poems are accompanied by actual drawings, which are even worse. You learn to cherish the effort and ignore the rhyme scheme. Sometimes your friends help orchestrate the meetings, running interference with your chaperones or creating distractions at just the right moment. Other times, they're the ones delivering and critiquing the poetry, offering advice on how to respond. Make it mysterious. Say you dreamed about a white dove, or maybe a goat. Men love symbolism. Friendship and romance are a tangled mess, but it's a welcome relief from the daily grind of chores and surveillance. Of course, if your father ever gets wind of it, all bets are off. The household security is doubled, routes to the market are rearranged, and you find yourself attending even more lectures on virtue and the dangers of frivolous thoughts. Yet, for all the crackdowns and new rules, the desire to be seen, chosen, and adored never fades. Because in ancient Rome, just like everywhere else, love laughs at boundaries. It turns girls into strategists, boys into bad poets, and chaperones into unwitting accomplices. In the end, the worst that can happen is that your heart is broken by a boy who can't rhyme Venus with anything sensible, but for a few secret moments, it's worth every risk. The big day arrives, and you're either ecstatic, terrified, or both. There's a parade, a feast, and a lot of weird rituals involving torches and pine cones. No pressure. Everyone's watching to see if you look nervous. From the moment the sun rises, the house is in chaos. Your mother is up before dawn, barking orders at servants and siblings, inspecting every stitch of your wedding dress for invisible stains. Aunts and grandmothers crowd the kitchen, stuffing you with honey cakes for luck and offering endless advice. Smile, but not too much. Don't trip on your hem, and whatever you do, don't let the left sandal go on first. The air smells of anxiety, incense, and, inexplicably, a suspicious amount of garlic. Someone claims it keeps away bad spirits, but you suspect it's mostly to keep hungry guests from stealing the wedding bread. You barely have a moment to yourself. As soon as you think you've found a quiet corner, a cousin appears with a garland of flowers and a reminder to keep your head down. The entire morning is a blur of primping and prepping, interrupted by the ritual application of perfume. Just enough to show off, not enough to seem vain. You're congratulated, pinched, and inspected from head to toe. Even the family dog looks concerned. And then it's time for the parade. Roman weddings are nothing if not public spectacles. You're escorted through the streets, flanked by torchbearers and surrounded by your family and friends who try to drown out your nerves with raucous singing and slightly off-key lyre playing. Neighbours and passers-by gather to watch the show, gossiping about your dress, your dowry, and whether your cheeks are red from excitement or pure panic. Somewhere in the crowd, you spot your soon-to-be husband, looking just as bewildered and desperately hoping he remembered his lines for the ceremonial vows. The ceremony itself is a patchwork of rituals, each more confusing than the last. You exchange simple vows. Where you go, I will go, and then there's a flurry of offerings to the household gods, just to make sure no one accidentally invokes the wrong deity. Torches and pine cones feature prominently. One is a symbol of fertility, the other, according to your aunt, is there to keep things lively. You don't ask too many questions. And then, the moment everyone's been waiting for, the crossing of the threshold. Your new husband carries you into his house, sometimes gracefully, sometimes with a level of coordination that suggests this isn't his first time dealing with heavy amphorae. There's more singing, more laughter, and, if you're lucky, only a little light-hearted teasing. The house is festooned with laurel, the bed sheets are freshly aired, for symbolic reasons, not comfort, and the servants have already started speculating about how many children you'll have by this time next year. The feast is where things really kick off. Plates of roasted meats, mountains of bread, and endless wine watered down for the virgins, but you suspect someone snuck you the real stuff. Every relative you've ever met, and a few you've never seen before, line up to congratulate you, offer unsolicited advice, and hand you good luck charms. Garlic shows up again, this time woven into braids, tucked under your pillow, and slipped into your pockets. For protection, they say, but it starts to feel like a theme. Throughout it all, you're expected to look radiant but not smug, grateful but not desperate, and above all, composed. Every gesture, every laugh, every fleeting glance at your new husband is observed, dissected, and discussed by an army of aunties. If you manage to avoid tripping, fainting, or accidentally calling your husband by the wrong name, you're already ahead of half the brides in Rome. As the party winds down and the crowd finally thins, you steal a few moments to breathe. Relief and terror mingle in your stomach. This is the end of one life and the start of another. You made it through the day, the rituals, the scrutiny, and the endless garlic. Tomorrow, the real adventure begins. For now, you drift off to sleep amid the faint scent of pine, honey, and more than a little garlic, praying to Venus that you wake up without a new scandal. In ancient Rome, that's about as close to happily ever after as it gets. The day after your wedding, your mother asks if everything went well in a tone that suggests she'd rather be interrogating a tax evader. There are gifts, awkward winks, and possibly another round of testing. You made it, sort of. Waking up on your first morning as a married woman in ancient Rome is a surreal experience. The world hasn't ended, the bed didn't collapse, and the sun is shining as if it doesn't know the entire neighborhood is waiting to gossip about you. You're sore in places you didn't know could be sore, and desperately hoping you didn't snore, talk, or say anything embarrassing in your sleep. Your new husband is either still dozing, blissfully unaware of the family parade about to descend, or already gone to impress the in-laws with his industry. The first thing that hits you is the quiet. For the first time in your life, you're not in your childhood home, surrounded by sisters, cousins, and servants bustling in the hallway. Instead, there's just you, a newly wrinkled wedding dress tossed over a chair, and the lingering smell of pine, honey, and of course, garlic. Before you can gather your thoughts, someone is at the door, usually your mother-in-law, armed with a breakfast tray and the determination of a woman who's waited years to run this household. Breakfast is an event in itself. You're plied with bread, cheese, and gentle interrogations disguised as casual conversation. Did you sleep well? Was the bed comfortable? Isn't it nice to have your own room? Each question is loaded, and every answer is carefully dissected for hidden meaning. You try to smile and nod at all the right moments, silently wondering if your wedding day performance passed the neighborhood's unwritten test. Speaking of tests, let's address the elephant in the room, the dreaded evidence. Ancient Roman culture is obsessed with public displays of virtue, and the morning after is no exception. There's a not-so-subtle expectation that your sheets will provide proof of your prior innocence. If the evidence is there, congratulations, there's an impromptu celebration, maybe even a little parade. If not, the mood sours and the whispers start. Someone fetches a midwife, someone else fetches your mother, and suddenly you're back in the center of a family drama, but this time as the main act. Once the official matters are settled, you're expected to accept gifts from your new family. Nothing says welcome to adulthood like a bronze hair comb, a set of pots, or, in truly awkward cases, fertility amulets from distant relatives who have too many opinions and not enough boundaries. Friends and family parade through, offering their congratulations, advice, and a few thinly veiled questions about how you like married life. You're meant to look pleased, grateful, and slightly mysterious, as if you've suddenly unlocked the secrets of the universe overnight. The gossip mill is running at full speed. Every movement, every blush, every bite of breakfast is fodder for analysis. You catch snippets of conversation. Did you see her smile? She looked tired. That's a good sign. I heard her mother brought extra linens, just in case. Meanwhile, your new husband mostly gets a hearty slap on the back, a mug of wine, and a reminder to take good care of the girl. The double standard is alive and well, and you can only hope that by next week, someone else's drama will have stolen the spotlight. As the day wears on, the attention, mercifully, shifts to more mundane things, household chores, family schedules, and preparing for the next round of guests. You settle into your new role, still unsure what comes next, but at least you're not the only one. Every married woman you know has survived this strange ritual and lived to tell the tale, or at least hint about it at future festivals. By nightfall, you realize you've made it through one of the most bizarre and stressful rites of passage the ancient world has to offer. You're a married woman now, officially, and if you can handle the scrutiny of Roman wedding customs, you can handle almost anything. For now, you curl up in your new bed, grateful for a little peace, a lot of garlic, and the hope that tomorrow will bring fewer questions and more sleep. What happens if you don't manage to secure a marriage, or worse, lose your reputation? Ancient Rome is not forgiving. Options include religious exile, joining a cult, or becoming the subject of very pointed dinner conversation for the next decade. In a society where every neighbor knows your business and the value of a girl's reputation is roughly on par with the family silver, not making it on the marriage market is about as disastrous as losing the family farm at dice. From childhood, the message is clear. Your job is to get married, preferably to someone with decent teeth and a family name that doesn't make your father wince. If, by some twist of fate or rumor, you don't seal the deal, the fallout begins, and it's not subtle. First comes the pity, delivered in the form of loaded questions and endless unsolicited advice. Every aunt, neighbor, and old friend of your mother takes turns reminding you that there's still time, or, more ominously, there are other ways to serve the gods. You become a project for every aspiring matchmaker in the city. Suddenly, your calendar is full of suspiciously timed accidental meetings with local bachelors, visiting merchants, or anyone whose pulse and property might solve your problem. If marriage never materializes, or if your reputation takes a fatal hit, and in Rome, fatal can mean as little as a misinterpreted glance or a missing dowry item, you might find yourself gently but firmly nudged out of polite society. The phrase "better luck next time" takes on a whole new meaning when next time might involve relocating to a distant uncle's villa or, for the more unfortunate, being shuffled off to a religious order. Religious exile, aka joining the ranks of temple servants or lesser-known cults, is one of the more honorable exits available, if your family can swing it. It's not the glamorous life of a Vestal virgin, that lottery was over years ago, but you'll spend your days sweeping altars, arranging flowers, and chanting prayers instead of gossiping at the forum. Some girls make the best of it. Others spend their time plotting how to sneak out after dark. Either way, it's a far cry from the marriage market, but at least it comes with free food and a roof over your head. For the unlucky few who lose their reputation entirely, maybe a broken engagement, a rumor that won't die, or a failed virginity check, life gets even trickier. The social doors slam shut with a finality that would make a Roman fortress jealous. You're no longer invited to family gatherings, your name is whispered behind hands at the baths, and your parents invest in a lot more wine at dinner. If you're really unlucky, your story becomes a cautionary tale for every girl in your neighborhood, complete with wild embellishments and, inevitably, a moral about what not to do. In extreme cases, the consequences can be almost comical in their cruelty. You might be sent to live with a widowed aunt in the countryside, forced to endure endless tales of her own marital disappointments and a diet of boiled turnips. Or perhaps you'll find yourself managing your parents' household, forever cast in the role of the responsible spinster, trusted with everyone's secrets but nobody's affection. Your friends, those who survived the marriage market, visit you out of loyalty, but the dynamic has changed. You're now the lesson, the one everyone is told not to emulate, even if it was all a matter of bad luck and worse timing. Yet, there are stories, whispered and hopeful, of women who make the best of it. Some become business owners, running small shops or lending money at interest. Others channel their experience into matchmaking for the next generation, gaining a quiet power from their outsider status. And a few, legend says, find love anyway, hidden, unofficial, but no less real. So, In ancient Rome, if you didn't make it onto the marital scoreboard, life was certainly tougher. But it wasn't always the end. You might become a footnote in someone else's story or the punchline at dinner, but sometimes, just sometimes, you'd rewrite the script, living quietly, a little outside the lines, but still very much alive. In a city obsessed with reputation, there's something almost heroic about surviving it. You survived ancient Rome's virginity obstacle course. You've made it to adulthood, maybe even with your dignity mostly intact. Now you get to look back and wonder how anyone managed it at all, and thank the gods for modern life, washing machines, and the option to say no thanks to matchmaking festivals. Once, your days were a whirlwind of chore charts, rumours, and family negotiations that made modern office politics look like a picnic. Every glance, gesture, and giggle was a high-stakes wager. Now, with a few years of perspective and a lot more sleep, you can actually laugh about the endless lectures on modesty and the downright terrifying stories about girls who broke the rules. You marvel at the sheer energy it took to get through a single day. Never mind the years of living on edge. Looking back, there's a strange sense of pride in having run the gauntlet. You remember the whispered warnings, "Don't talk to boys. Don't drop your cup at the feast. Don't, whatever you do, eat the oysters." It seemed impossible, absurd, and unfair, but somehow you made it out the other side. Maybe you even picked up a few useful skills along the way, like weaving, decoding bad poetry, or surviving a full day on 3 lentils and a prayer to Juno. There are regrets too, of course. Maybe you wish you'd spoken up more, laughed louder, or dared to sneak out with your friends that one festival night. There are friends you lost to marriage, exile, or just the relentless grind of Roman adulthood. Sometimes you think about the dreams you kept hidden, the adventures you imagined, the freedom you craved, the small rebellions that got you through another week. You know you weren't alone. Every girl you knew was quietly rebelling in her own way, hoping to someday tell the story with a laugh instead of a sigh. And then there's gratitude. Deep, overwhelming gratitude that you made it through. Not just because you avoided scandal most of the time, but because you survived in a world designed to catch you out at every turn. You're grateful for the rare moments of solidarity, for the friends who risked gossip to stand by you, and even for the nosy aunts whose warnings, in hindsight, were often more about their own fears than your failings. And when you see young girls now, free to say no thanks to matchmaking, free to choose their own friends, careers and paths, you feel a surge of hope and, occasionally, disbelief. It's almost impossible to imagine telling your younger self that she'd make it. Through the dowry drama, the endless chaperoning, the catastrophic festivals, and the suspicious stares from grandmothers who seemed to live forever. But you did. You learned to be resilient, to find laughter in the absurd, and to appreciate the simple freedom of privacy, a freedom your ancestors would barely recognize. So you look back with a mix of gratitude and relief, knowing you're part of a long line of survivors, each one stumbling through the same gauntlet and finding her own way out. You learned, at last, that worth can't be measured in linen, land, or family legends. It lives in the friendships you built, the dreams you protected, and the tiny, hard-won victories that nobody else ever noticed. If you ever find yourself longing for the good old days, remember the laundry, the lectures, and the looming threat of being shipped off to Spain for one wrong look. Take a moment to be grateful for the warm bed, the hot water, and the chance to choose your own path. In the end, surviving ancient Rome's virginity obstacle course wasn't just about purity. It was about endurance, humor, and hope. And that's worth celebrating every single day. Welcome to the ancient Roman bathroom, where even your body hair is a public matter. Mothers, aunts, and random old women all have opinions about how you should present yourself down there. Tweezers, pumice stones, and even the odd seashell are brought out in a desperate attempt to make you look like a marble statue. It's less spa day, more medieval torture. You thought waxing was modern? Rome says, hold my garum. From the moment you reach puberty, you learn that ancient Roman beauty is about more than clothes, posture, and a demure smile. It's about being as smooth as freshly carved marble, at least that's the dream. Every female relative you have is determined to help you achieve this look, whether you like it or not. There's no such thing as privacy when it comes to personal grooming. If your body hair escapes notice, it's only because your family is too busy inspecting your eyebrows or debating the proper way to braid your hair. The process is nothing short of brutal. First, there are tweezers, tiny, cruel, and expertly wielded by your grandmother, who claims she learned the craft from a Vestal Virgin herself. If you flinch, she clucks her tongue and reminds you that beauty is pain. Pumice stones are next. Rough, gritty, and perfect for removing not just hair but any lingering sense of dignity. Forget soft, soothing lotions. Instead, it's a vigorous scrub, sometimes with a dash of olive oil for moisture, but mostly for the smell. And then there are the seashells. Supposedly the height of sophistication, they're used to scrape away stubble with a sharp edge and a prayer to Venus for minimal blood loss. You're not sure who invented this, but you're willing to bet they never tried it on themselves. The whole experience is accompanied by a running commentary on your progress. Don't miss that patch. Careful near the hip. Remember what happened to your cousin Livia? The aunts swap horror stories of girls who went too far and ended up with mysterious rashes, which of course became the talk of the forum for weeks. If you're feeling truly unlucky, you might be introduced to the ancient Roman version of depilatory creams. A stinging concoction of resin, ashes, and other questionable ingredients. The smell alone could drive away the Furies. Some claim it works wonders. Others whisper that it's a curse passed down by particularly vengeful ancestors. Either way, you're expected to endure it with a stoic face, since no one likes a complainer. All the while, your mother stands guard to ensure you don't skip any steps or, Jupiter forbid, decide to leave anything natural. The societal pressure is relentless. Statues and mosaics everywhere show women as impossibly smooth, and anyone who fails to measure up is gently, or not so gently, reminded that men notice these things. Never mind that half the men you know have more hair on their toes than you do on your entire body. Appearances are everything. Even the family slaves get in on the advice, passing down recipes and warnings from their own mothers, until you're surrounded by a multi-generational committee determined to leave you hairless, if not emotionally scarred. Occasionally, a bold friend confesses she secretly left a patch for luck, or because she just couldn't face the pumice one more time. These tiny acts of rebellion are quietly celebrated in whispered conversations at the bathhouse, where you commiserate over shared trauma and swap tips for soothing burns. You all agree that, given the choice, you'd rather face another virginity check than endure a full grooming session under the gaze of the family council. By the time you've survived your weekly grooming marathon, you're exhausted and strangely proud, another bizarre rite of passage checked off the Roman girl's to-do list. Your skin might be red and a little raw, but you know you've met the impossible standard, at least for now. So, the next time you complain about waxing or razors, remember the girls of Rome, armed with seashells, pumice stones, and nerves of steel, whose greatest beauty secret was simply surviving the ordeal. In the end, you might not look exactly like a marble statue, but you've certainly earned the right to stand tall next to one, hairy toes and all. Your mother insists you sleep with a sprig of rue under your pillow and make the sign of the fig at anyone who looks at you sideways. Virgins in Rome are told that evil eyes can snatch their purity, so you end up living like a walking, talking rabbit's foot. Every cough is a curse, every compliment a hex. Don't laugh. Someone once tied garlic around your neck just in case. If you thought surviving gossip and chaperones was tough, try living under the constant threat of curses, hexes, and supernatural mishaps. Ancient Rome is a city obsessed with magic, good and bad, and nobody gets more nervous attention than an eligible virgin. The moment you start showing up in public without a parent glued to your side, the amulets appear. Bronze, bone, carved stone. You're a living jewelry box, and every charm comes with a wild origin story. This was given by a priest who once stared down a wolf. This keeps away jealous neighbors. The logic is never clear, but you never argue. Before bed each night, your mother performs a small ritual, waving dried herbs through the air and mumbling prayers to keep out unwanted spirits. You're told to avoid mirrors in the dark because your reflection might get stolen, and to sprinkle salt at the threshold after an argument, especially if it was with your older brother. Rue under your pillow keeps nightmares, and allegedly, nosy suitors at bay. Some mornings you wake up entangled in half a herb garden, but you're assured that's better than the alternative. Walking through the marketplace is a challenge. If you make eye contact with a stranger, your aunt rushes to make the sign of the fig, an ancient Roman hand gesture that's basically the original talk to the hand, except with more anti-demonic intent. Compliments are met with suspicion. "What lovely hair you have," is answered with a quick spit on the ground or a muttered spell. You start to develop a twitch from all the surreptitious gestures, but it's better than being cursed. Or so they say. The garlic necklace is the crown jewel of protection, good for scaring away evil, and even better at clearing space on crowded festival days. Sure, you'll never get a secret admirer with the scent of garlic wafting behind you, but you're told it's a small price to pay for your virtue. Your friends are in the same boat, comparing their latest protective charms, competing for the most creative amulet, and secretly wishing just one of the spells would keep their mother from checking up on them every 5 minutes. And then there are the household rituals. Salt thrown over the left shoulder after a bad dream. Small offerings left at crossroads to distract wandering spirits. Whispered prayers at the hearth, just in case a particularly nosy household god is listening in. Some families hire local witches, known as wise women, to craft extra potent charms. The results are mixed. One girl brags about never getting a headache, while another ends up with green stains on her fingers for weeks. Boys, of course, get none of this. Their only worry is the occasional stern lecture about not attracting the wrong kind of ghost during Saturnalia. Meanwhile, you're carrying around a collection of herbs, bones, and garlic that could supply half the city's apothecaries. Sometimes, it gets to be too much. You and your friends invent your own anti-superstition spells, like hopping on one foot before a festival or reciting poems backward to confuse the fates. Whether or not these work is irrelevant, the real comfort comes from laughing together about your shared paranoia, sneaking each other the latest protection recipe, and daring one another to walk through the marketplace with no charms at all. Looking back, you realize most of these rituals were just another way for your family to show they cared, even if it meant smelling like a soup pot or sleeping on a bed of crunchy roux. In ancient Rome, you weren't just protecting your virtue from boys, but from a world full of spirits, jealous glances, and whatever else the neighbors believed could snatch your luck away. So next time you see a rabbit's foot keychain, remember, you were the original good luck charm, just better accessorized and, possibly, better protected. So, tonight as you settle deeper into your bed, a real bed, with actual sheets, maybe even a memory foam pillow, let's take a moment to appreciate just how far we've come from ancient Rome's wild and weird obsession with virginity. You've survived the chaperones, the wardrobe malfunctions, the public baths, the suspicious aunties, and the never-ending parade of marriage proposals from sweaty, tunic-clad senators with questionable personal hygiene. You endured dowries, survived the Vestal Virgin lottery, and made it through medical remedies that were probably invented by someone who failed out of olive oil school. You've dodged rumors, gossipy neighbors, and the existential terror of being the subject of an awkward religious festival. Frankly, if you lasted a week as a Roman virgin, you deserve a laurel wreath and a tax exemption. But here's the thing. Behind all the absurdity, awkward rituals, and unflattering tunics, the people of ancient Rome were just trying to make it through the day, just like us. Their anxieties, hopes, and desperate attempts to keep their dignity intact are weirdly relatable, minus, thankfully, the communal baths and virginity inspections. It's a reminder that, across history, people have always found creative, ridiculous, and sometimes heroic ways to survive the rules and pressures of their world. So tonight, as you close your eyes and drift off, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to your ancestors who survived arranged marriages, bizarre medical advice, and toga stains that never came out. Be grateful for privacy, plumbing, and the freedom to say no thanks to suspicious goat fat potions and ancient matchmaking festivals. Because history may be absurd, gross, and a little terrifying, but it's also proof that people are stubborn, hopeful, and, above all, determined to get a good night's sleep, one way or another. Good night, sleep tight, and remember, whatever today threw at you, at least you didn't have to explain your purity to a table full of senators and their mothers. See you next time.